Victoria sat quietly in the church pew, her hands folded in her lap as voices murmured all around her. The sanctuary was filled with familiar faces, family members, old friends, church members, neighbors. Some cried softly, others exchanged hugs and memories, yet somehow all of it felt distant. She was there, but she wasn't there. Her eyes followed the movement around the room, but her mind had drifted far away. Memories came in waves. Her cousin laughing at family gatherings, childhood moments, holidays, conversations she never thought would be the last. Life had seemed so certain then. Now, sitting in the sanctuary, surrounded by flowers and sorrow, Victoria couldn't stop the questions racing through her mind. How did this happen? How did we get here? Just a few weeks ago, everything seemed normal. Why does life change so quickly? Why do we spend so much time worrying about things that may never happen, only to be blindsided by things we never saw coming? The weight of it all settled heavily on her chest. The promotion, the new opportunities, Nash, the future husband she had been praying for. For a moment, none of it seemed important. The funeral program rested in her hands as she stared down at it, thinking about how fragile life really was, how quickly a phone call could change everything, how one moment could separate what was from what would never be again. As the pastor began to speak, Victoria slowly lifted her eyes towards the front of the church. The words washed over her, but one thought remained. If life could change this quickly, then maybe she needed to stop waiting for the perfect moment to live it. The funeral had ended, but the heaviness remained. Victoria stepped away from the crowd gathered outside the church. Around her, family members exchanged hugs, shared memories, and slowly made their way to their cars. Their voices blended into the background as she walked alone toward the parking lot. She glanced down at the phone in her hand. A message from Nash lit up the screen. Looking forward to tonight. I'll pick you up at 8. Dress elegant and be comfortable. We're spending the evening on a yacht. Address attached. Victoria paused for a moment, staring at the message. A week ago, when Nash had called, accepting the invitation seemed harmless enough. Since then, everything had changed. More than once, she had considered canceling. Truthfully, she wasn't in the mood for dinner, conversation, or meeting anyone. Grief had a way of draining the excitement out of everything. But standing there beneath the afternoon sun, surrounded by reminders of how quickly life could change, she made a decision. Maybe sitting alone with her thoughts wasn't what she needed tonight. Maybe for a few hours she could step away from the sadness. She slipped her phone into her purse and continued walking. Tonight wasn't about romance. It wasn't about Nash. It was simply about finding a brief escape from the weight she had been carrying all week. When Victoria arrived home, the silence greeted her before she even closed the front door. She set her purse down and stood still for a moment. The funeral was over, but the weight of it all remained. The disbelief, the sadness, the questions, the feeling that life had changed in an instant and she still hadn't caught up. Without turning on the television or checking her phone, Victoria made her way to the place she always went when life became too heavy to carry alone, her secret place. Closing the door behind her, she sat down and let out a long breath. For a few minutes, she said nothing. Then she began to talk. God, I don't even know where to start. The words came slowly at first, but before long, everything she had been holding in began to pour out. She told him about her cousin, about the shock, about how difficult it was to accept that someone could be here one moment and gone the next. She told him about the promotion, the opportunities that seemed to finally be opening up, and how strange it felt that good things were happening at the same time her heart was breaking. Why does it always seem like every time something good happens, something painful follows? She whispered. The question hung in the air. But Victoria wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing God. She wasn't complaining. She was certainly not ungrateful. She was simply tired. Tired of carrying questions, tired of carrying disappointments, tired of carrying all that she was carrying, tired of trying to understand things that made absolutely no sense. So she did what she had learned to do years ago. She unloaded it all. Every fear, every hurt, every unanswered question, one by one, she laid them before God. And when there was nothing left to say, Victoria sat quietly in his presence, allowing the tears she had been holding back all week to finally fall. For the first time since receiving the news about her cousin, she felt herself breathe a little easier. The pain was still there, the loss was still real, but somehow the burden felt lighter. Let me say to everyone that is listening to this story, you can carry your burdens to God and leave them there. He will fix it every time. Find your secret place. Now let's get back to the story. Back at home, Victoria stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fastening her earrings as she studied her reflection. For a moment, she stopped. The heaviness was still there. No amount of makeup, perfume, or elegant clothing could completely hide the sadness she had been carrying since her cousin's passing. Her eyes drifted to the counter as she quietly questioned whether she should even go. Maybe she should cancel. Maybe she should stay home. Maybe she wasn't ready. The thought lingered for a few seconds before she slowly shook her head. No. She had spent the entire week surrounded by grief, memories, and unanswered questions. While nothing could erase the pain, sitting at home alone with her thoughts wasn't helping either. Tonight wasn't about forgetting her cousin. It wasn't about pretending everything was okay. It was simply about giving herself the permission to breathe. Victoria took a deep breath, applied the finishing touches to her look, and offered herself a small smile in the mirror. Just go, she whispered, just for a little while. Picking up her purse, she glanced one last time at her reflection before turning toward the door. The sadness hadn't disappeared, but for the first time all week, she felt ready to step outside of it, if only for a few hours. By 8 o'clock that evening, Victoria found herself aboard a beautiful yacht, gliding across the water beneath the moonlit sky. The city lights shimmered in the distance, reflecting across the gentle waves as the vessel moved smoothly through the night. Nash had spared no expense. A violinist played softly in the background, filling the evening air with elegant melodies. Candles flickered across the table, casting a warm glow over the dinner setting. The captain remained at the helm while the yacht carried them farther from shore, creating the feeling that, for a little while, the rest of the world had disappeared. Victoria couldn't help but admire the view. For the first time all week, she found herself relaxing. The conversation flowed easily as Nash shared stories about his business, his travels, and some of the experiences that had shaped his life. Victoria listened, occasionally laughing and sharing a few stories of her own. As the yacht cut through the water, the cool breeze brushed against her face, carrying away some of the heaviness she had been carrying. For a few hours, there were no funeral programs, no condolences, no difficult phone calls, just the sound of the violin, the rhythm of the waves, and the company of someone determined to give her a memorable evening. And for the moment, Victoria allowed herself to simply enjoy it. After dinner, Victoria and Nash stepped away from the table and made their way toward the railing of the yacht. The night air was cool, and the water shimmered beneath the moonlight as the yacht moved steadily across the bay. Each wave caught the reflection of city lights, creating what looked like thousands of diamonds dancing across the water. With a glass in her hand, Victoria listened as Nash talked about his business, his goals, and the things he wanted to accomplish in life. At least she tried to listen. The truth was, part of her had drifted away. As she stood there looking out at the water, her mind began to wander. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine what life could look like if things actually worked out. No struggling, no constant disappointment, no wondering when her breakthrough would come. Just peace, softness, stability. She glanced over at Nash. He was handsome, confident, successful. And by judging the evening he had planned, he clearly had the means to provide a lifestyle most people only dreamed about. Victoria found herself wondering what it would be like to wake up every day without carrying the weight she had carried for so many years, to simply enjoy life, to travel, to laugh, to rest, to be cared for. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to picture it: a soft life, a different life, maybe even a life with him. Nash? Victoria blinked and looked up. She hadn't realized he'd asked her a question. A smile spread across her face as she laughed softly. I'm sorry, she admitted. What were you saying? Nash smiled and shook his head. I knew you weren't listening. Victoria laughed again. For the first time all week, it felt good to laugh. And as the yacht continued across the moonlit water, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment without worrying about tomorrow. Back at the table, dessert had replaced dinner, and the conversation continued as effortlessly as the yacht moved across the water. Victoria found herself relaxing more than she had expected. The laughter came easier now. The heaviness she had carried all week seemed to be a little further away. She listened as Nash talked, occasionally teasing him and laughing at some of his stories. To her surprise, she was actually enjoying herself. Maybe more than enjoying herself. She was comfortable. For the first time that evening, she wasn't thinking about grief, responsibilities, or the endless list of things waiting for her back home. She was simply present. As Nash spoke, Victoria found herself studying him. He was attractive, successful, confident without appearing arrogant. And after the effort he had put into the evening, she could understand why so many women would find him appealing. A small smile crossed her face as she lifted her glass. Maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. Nash smiled back. The atmosphere between them had softened, and he seemed to notice it too. Unfortunately, he noticed it the wrong way. As Victoria set her glass down and turned slightly toward him, Nash suddenly moved closer and wrapped an arm around her. Before she could fully process what was happening, his hand traveled somewhere it had absolutely no business being. Her breast. Victoria's smile vanished instantly. Her body stiffened. The warmth of the evening disappeared in a single moment. She quickly pulled away and stared at him in disbelief. Nash! The shock in her voice was impossible to miss. What are you doing? The question hung in the air as the yacht continued gliding across the water, the music still playing softly in the background. This one moment had changed everything. The moment Nash touched her, Victoria jerked away from him as if she had been burned, her face filled with shock and disbelief. For a second, she simply stared at him, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she couldn't believe what had just happened. Nash, what is wrong with you? She demanded. The violinist immediately stopped playing. The soft music that had filled the evening vanished, leaving only the sound of the water against the yacht. Nash lifted his hands. Victoria, relax. I thought, no, she snapped. You didn't think. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. One dinner, one yacht ride, one evening of conversation does not give you the permission to put your hands on me. Victoria, I was just... No, Nash. She took a step back, creating even more space between them. I came here because I enjoyed your company. I came here because I thought you were a gentleman. The disappointment on her face cut deeper than anger. I trusted you. Nash opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria wasn't finished. She pointed toward the dark shoreline in the distance. This yacht better turn around immediately. Victoria, no. Her voice was firm. I want to go home now. The captain glanced back from the helm, sensing the tension. Victoria folded her arms. And if this yacht isn't headed back to shore in the next 60 seconds, we're going to have an entirely different problem. The seriousness in her expression left no room for negotiation. For the first time that evening, Nash realized he had completely misread the situation. Victoria wasn't flattered. She wasn't impressed. And she certainly wasn't interested in excuses. She was offended, deeply offended. The evening that had begun with moonlight, music, and laughter had ended with a boundary Nash should have never crossed.